This is Plastic Adventures.
Hey everybody, it is Steve and Tony from the Plastic Adventures toy community. And on today's episode of Plastic Bits, we're going to be discussing something that is near and dear to both Tony and I's heart. What got us into tabletop role playing? As you notice, Doug is not with us. He is being a responsible adult this week. So you're just stuck with me and Tony for now, as if viewership could get any lower. Um, anyways, I don't know about you, Tony, but my first exposure to role playing games was pretty early. What's your earliest memories of cracking a book or seeing something on your shelf that kind of got you to start thinking about role playing games?
So for me, I lived in a trailer park growing up, and I remember the first time I was introduced to D&D. There was some high school kids, and I was probably like in sixth grade, fifth grade, and I ran into them in the park, and they were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and that was the first time I'd ever experienced what role playing games were. And I made my character and was playing with these like high school kids.
Just
Had
some
no
rando
idea.
kids?
Yeah, didn't know what I was doing at all. One time game, and I think I got bored after 10 minutes and left. But I came back around to it in middle school. I was actually a pretty big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan when it came out, and I really, getting into the hobby, getting into the toys, I found the original, like the original old school black and white Ninja Turtle drawings. And I really started to get into the older style, the darker, grittier Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles information. And I remember I stumbled across it. Palladium Games put out the Ninja Turtles book, role playing game. And it wasn't even the fact that it was a role playing game. What captivated me was the art, the layouts of the books, just how interesting and cool it was. And so at the time, and you're talking back in the, I don't want to date myself, but late 80s, early 90s, when a book was like $5.99 for a role playing book.
Yeah, and I gotta ask, I don't remember this. The book was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. Did that actually precede the cartoons?
I don't know about that.
Because
I actually have a copy on my shelf over here.
yeah, what was it? The cartoons I think started in '88.
Right.
And original Turtles, I want to say were about 86 when that came around with Eastman and Layard, or however
Yeah.
you say his name.
Yeah.
But
They started the cart or the drawings and the comic books before the show.
yeah, and you're right, it was way grittier.
Yeah.
I've seen some interviews where they cited a lot of Frank Miller Daredevil influence, and it was kind of parody, but it was still really like hard and dark. And a lot of graphic novels were sort of going that direction at the time too. We had V for Vendetta, Dark Knight Returns,
Mhm.
Frank Miller's run on Daredevil, just a um, whole bunch of these really edgy, like adult oriented comics, and it seems like Ninja Turtles kind of nestled in with it.
They kind of revisited that with the latest series that they did with Ninja Turtles. It's the name slipping my mind right now, and I'm angry at myself. But it's the one where all the Ninja Turtles get killed, and Michelangelo, the most, you know,
Oh, The Last
truly,
Ronin.
yeah, that you wouldn't expect to be this like hard dude. He becomes this Ronin that starts to take revenge on the people for all the mayhem they've caused, killing the Ninja Turtles. And it's really interesting. It's an interesting paradigm for me because you took this guy that was kind of a jokester, not serious, and all of a sudden, this really big tragedy happens, and he basically transforms into this like not monster as far as like fighting, just like skills and powerful and like focused. Like it kind of, to me, it's cool because you see a character that maybe is silly, and then you see what they can do when they become focused, and it's pretty amazing. He becomes probably the most powerful or skilled Ninja Turtle, basically.
Yeah, I remember when that first came out. They were It was kind of a mystery. We didn't know who the last of the turtles was, and then it sort of reveals that it's Michelangelo. And in my mind, all I can think of is like, "Whoa, pizza!" But now he's like I'm Michelangelo. Where is the detonator? Batman, dark brooding. I haven't read it, but I've seen a lot of the pages posted in various groups, and it looks pretty terrific.
It's
So
pretty awesome.
that really, you're right. That kind of dovetails to the original Ninja Turtles, the role-playing game. That book was just, it was filled with that sort of like image comic styling.
Mhm.
And if you were a kid that was maybe 11, 12 years old, you might have walked into Infinite Frontiers in the Tri-Cities and seen that on the shelf after watching Ninja Turtles on a
Exactly.
Saturday morning or a weekday afternoon, and was like, man, what's going on with this?
Infinite Frontiers was my place. I started going to Infinite Frontiers when I was a young kid. I remember saving up lunch money or allowance, whatever I could put together, hopping on the local transit bus, and Saturday morning I was down there at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock whenever they opened up, and went in there and talked to Paul and Dan, and yeah, I mean, I got introduced to a lot of stuff, and to be honest, what was cool, not to sidetrack it, but I think Palladium, the game company, the books were interesting because they had a lot of that licensing for like Robotech, Ninja Turtles, and a lot of that was, I was at a point in my life where I was transitioning out of toys. I grew up in a household where you became an adult at age 12, and it was time to put that kid stuff away. And the way I could kind of get around that was, through like gaming, role playing books. I could still hold on to that nostalgia because Robotech, we grew up with that. It was on TV when we were kids. I couldn't have the toys anymore. So here I have this Palladium game that is Robotech. And that kind of started driving that. And then as I, went into high school, I met all the guys that we play with slowly, and we just through one another, like, Dale knew you, John knew this guy. When we kind of just, it was honestly a very unlikely group of individuals that became a group of friends. I don't think outside of role playing, a lot of us didn't have a lot in common. So I don't think naturally we would have, formed the bond that we have today. It really is what defined our group.
Yeah, it was. And like you said, a lot of us were not, we were not like who would normally be friends outside of it, but it's kind of telling with all the ups and downs that we've had with each other on the ins, on the outs. I mean, I think you can sit our core group of friends down and we're all friends at the
Absolutely.
barbecue, drinking beers and all of that business. So kind of, I think you're 100% right there. And it's funny that you bring up the whole like, well, no, no, Dad, I'm not playing with toys. I've got these books with rules and dice, and we just pretend that we are the toys now. It's totally different. Chicks will totally be into it.
It's all how you sell it.
Yeah, especially to your dad. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
just
I could see him adjusting the chew in his bottom lip and being like,
I'm just
nope.
reading and learning.
Really? Bang something. Don't
He's
play a
got a
game.
book.
Yeah.
But he was pretty smart, I guess.
So so you had this experience as like a preteen or something, and you just like found this random group of role-playing kids, not the drug kids, not the bad kids. They were just some randos in a park. That's kind of funny to me.
Which honestly, for a trailer park, I got pretty lucky. Could have turned out way worse.
Yeah, I was thinking Columbia Park is where
Yeah,
the where you or Key Waden. There you go.
yeah, it could have been way worse, but no, that was my first experience with seeing role playing. Like I said, I was so young. I was like fifth grade, I think. I didn't really understand the concept, and this was probably back when like first edition D&D was out, and that was, I think, far more complicated than the D&D we play today. So,
Yeah.
but
Well,
after moving to
it was almost a non-start for me with
yeah,
games. Um, I remembered being down at Infinite Frontiers, and in the 90s I collected comic books. So,
yeah,
I was way into the Punisher and Batman and all these other books, and I would always buy the number one that came out almost regardless of what it was. And if there's something the 90s taught me, it's don't effing collect any of this crap. It's not worth anything. There's so much of it.
Yeah.
But also, I was also in Dan's store, and I went into the RP section and I saw Robotech for the first time. And at this point, there's no internet, there's no toy groups that are working together, there's no communities or anything. And it had been years since I'd seen Robotech in the toy aisle, and years since I had viewed any Robotech the cartoon. So I saw this book and I got really interested. You know, it was almost like finding something amazing, you know, like an
Yeah.
artifact or something. Almost like when you go to the yard sale and you know it's late 90s and you see 80s GI Joe or something, you're like, oh my God, man. So I find this Robotech book and I'm thumbing through it. Um, and I'm like, man, these rules are complicated. This is too much to remember.
Yeah.
What's MDC? What's SDC? What's attacks per round? What's all of this business? Why does this do that? What are all these stats? Oh my God, why do you manage all these skills? And I was probably, I want to say I was 12 when I found this book. And I'm like, F this. I'm not gonna play this. So um I'm trying to think how this all worked out because I think that I ended up trading that to Dale for BattleTech. And
Okay.
BattleTech fascinated me because it had all the Robotech mecha, and it seemed like it was a little bit easier rules to start into. And I think that, or maybe I loaned Dale my Robotech book and he took it and photocopied every page. I think he, I think his grandma had a copier or something, but we got to get him on here to talk about it at some
We
point
do.
because it was something obscene. He had like 150 photocopied pages out of this Robotech book, like front side only, you know, and he understood it, but
Yeah.
um,
Dale, he was a sharp guy.
anyways, uh, I think I was a freshman in high school. I started playing a lot of BattleTech, and once our group got together, I want to say first for really real, I played a little Robotech with Dale. I think we played a little bit together, and you know, just some fleeting thing when I was over at his place for a while, and it takes you like it with Palladium. Holy shit, that takes you like an hour to make a character and to, you know, to manage all the percentages and everything. Probably the most horrible gaming system ever contrived. Anyways, uh, there was Robotech, but I think it might have been Heroes or something where we all got together and because you guys were playing a lot of Palladium, the fantasy, Palladium fantasy. I played a
Yeah.
little bit of that, and then I think Heroes is what really kind of like pushed us together.
Mhm.
And for as awful and imbalanced as Palladium was, I mean, you were so right about all their licenses. They couldn't do anything wrong in the
No,
90s and into the 2000s.
I think that's why they were so successful, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you had Rifts, you had Ninjas and Super Spies, you had Heroes. I mean, there was just a huge slate.
Yeah,
Um, wasn't there not a Supernatural game that they had too? I don't remember what that
yeah,
was.
they did. I think it was just called Supernatural, to be honest with you. And it
Yeah,
was,
there was a lot to it.
yeah, it's interesting because, meeting the guys, starting to game. I remember I used to go work with my grandparents on their farm during the spring and the summer. And I remember I met up with the guys. We started hanging out, and I remember I usually spent about the first month of the summer up in Ephrata, doing farming and things like that. I remember that summer, that first month I was gone. I found this little tiny bookstore in this little tiny town, and they had Dungeons and Dragons books. And I was so shocked. I couldn't believe that this little town had books. And I remember I took every penny I earned that summer, and I came back home with like the Dungeon Masters book. This is all second edition, Player's Handbook, the Forgotten Realms book. And I remember I had books that I brought back, and some of the guys were like, I've never even seen these books before, because this probably nobody ever bought any of these books in this little bookshop. But it was,
Uh,
I mean, it became kind of, a, I wouldn't say like a negative obsession, but it really sparked the love I have for collecting like books that I today and some of the collecting, and it allows you to kind of take back some of that nostalgia. I still have a lot of my books. I still have my Robotech books from when we were kids. I still have, my Heroes Unlimited books that we used to play. And to me, that's amazing because I look at those books and I'm like, I can't believe I have this item 33 years later that all of us as kids were reading and flipping through and making our characters. And it really does it. You look at that on the shelf and I don't even have to open it, and it just brings back great memories.
Yeah, I've got that blue duffel bag,
Yeah.
and I still have a Heroes Unlimited third edition. I still have Robotech. Um, I do have the new Star Wars book and Pathfinder, but I never had to buy books because between you and Dale,
Yeah.
all it had to do was say new, and Dale would pick that sucker up, even if we never played it.
Yeah. I was pretty bad. Dale and we definitely like to collect the books.
Well, I got a story that's going to make you want to like choke the life out of me.
Oh,
Uh,
no.
and I think when I was it must have been freshman or June or sophomore in high school. My mom worked for Goodwill and she did job development, and her office was up above the Goodwill retail store over in Pasco.
Yeah.
And at one point she said, "Hey, there's a bunch of hardback Dungeons and Dragons books that came in. Do you want them?" And there must have been like 15 Advanced Dungeons and Dragons hardback books that she brought home. And I start reading it and I'm like, oh man, there's like rules and stuff with how to play. I traded all of those books for Saturday Night Slam Masters for Super Nintendo. That Capcom fighting wrestling game, I traded like right now in today's money, $2,000 worth of books or whatever it would be, because they were all like, early 80s first prints. You open them up and they still smell like new books inside. Like, I'll never, there's like a lot of reading and stuff. I don't want to do that. Let's play Battletech. I'll trade you all these books for a Super Nintendo game.
I just, I don't know what
And
to say right
not my shiningest moment, but thank you for staying on the other side there. I was
I gotta
assuming
go.
that you were going to say something like, well, we're done here.
We're not friends anymore.
Yeah. And my favorite thing you've said so far, do not contact me.
I'm sorry I'm so antisocial, everyone that watches our show.
That's all right, man. I live in the real world too. I don't blame you.
But,
Um, so yeah, it starts in high school for us.
mhm.
Uh, did you ever have a favorite system? Because we played a lot.
Oh. It's funny. I've actually, I played in a couple of different groups, and I actually, our group was primarily, like you mentioned, Palladium focused. It was when I started working my first job, I met some guys that actually gamed, and that was when I started getting introduced to things outside of the norm. Things like Aliens, the role playing game. This is Twilight 2000. Slay Industries, Shadowrun, and I was able, fortunately, to bring some of those books into our group, and we started playing some of those games. But realistically, what really made gaming fun for me was just being with you guys. I really didn't honestly care, what we were playing, what we were doing. I always looked at the gaming. It was important, obviously. I was an outcast. I don't want to speak for everybody in the group, but you didn't talk about that stuff when you were a kid. You got beat up for that stuff when you were a kid. I hate to say it. It was a different time back then, and you got picked on for talking about Dungeons and Dragons. And it was cool to me walking down the hallway at school, and we had this 7-8 person group of friends, and like we would stop talk and we'd have our own thing that we would talk about, and nobody knew what we were talking about. And it was cool to me. It was just having that large group of friends that I knew I could count on. That we were young, and it was hard to socialize back then. And so the gaming to me kind of was always secondary. It was always the friendship. Then as a kid, probably the gaming was important, obviously, but looking back at it as an adult, a more mature perspective of my life, I would definitely say I think what probably kept me engaged was the friendships.
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. It's way more about getting together with the guys and having a good time. And if anybody knows how to get way out of the game and just have fun, it's you and me talking about what species in Star Wars we'd like to eat because there's a lot of them. But you know that we look back now and yes, it might have derailed a little bit, but we got other people engaged in the fun too. So
I hate to I think they just hated to admit that they were having a good time too.
yeah, they felt bad, but you know, as far in Star Wars, you know, I'm not going to go down that species road thing there, but yeah, needless to say, we had a lot of fun when we got together.
I will say
Uh,
though, Dale was probably the only one that got super offended by it. He was very sensitive.
Whatever. Yeah, coming from that guy. Um,
It's not my fault that Mon Calamari looks like delicious seafood.
there we go. Okay, not eating Star Wars. No matter how delicious it would appear. So, yeah, I think it back then it was just nice knowing that you're not by yourself.
Yeah,
You have that social circle of people. And now, you know, like it's like one of the most acceptable things in the world. There's
yeah,
segments on I listen to a lot of NPR because we don't get a lot of radio stations up here. So if I'm cruising around like today, where I was in my truck more than I was in the office, they have just a regular segment about gaming and pop culture, and I'm just like, what? Who heckled you? Who hassled you? You don't know what it's like to be a desperate nerd loser that plays these games. I'm glad, you know, it's um role-playing games in general, I think are an excellent way to express creativity. And for those of us that don't have the patience to write a book, it's pretty terrific to be able to craft some kind of an adventure and just do that complete improv with the rest of your, you know, with the rest of your group of people and share that creativity.
absolutely.
At some point when we were kids, it stopped, you know, when we created characters, it just stopped being like, you know, Steve the Veritech fighter pilot or Tony the hero. We really started adding a lot of like nuance and character, and it's maybe that's an evolutionary step in gaming where it stops being what would I do and you start thinking what would my character do.
Yeah,
And you know, I think that's probably one of the most intriguing things about it. It's very some of these systems like the new D20 well, 3.5 is very accessible. Um, and I've always been about accessible and ease and adventure and less about rules, which is probably why, you know, I think that I started using my own systems for a wrestling role-playing game very early. Um, Sean and a few of our other buddies, a guy named Jim. Shit, I think that was middle school, 8th grade, when at lunchtime I ran a wrestling game with very like just a basic framework of rules. And uh, it was just a lot of fun because it was very easy to resolve without a lot of like textbook stuff. But most importantly, it was a way to create and share with people.
yeah.
Um, I'm wondering when I look back, when do you think we actually started doing good quality adventures and having like good nuanced characters? When do you think that started happening for our group of people?
I think we saw sparks of it when we were kids, like high school, you know, in the later years, probably junior, senior year, as we became more, you know, older, more mature. I think we began to see sparks, and I think that's what ignited the blaze. But I think to me, the adventure that immediately comes to my mind that just stands out was the Star Wars game that we created, that we played. You know, that to me was the first time that you're right. We no longer were like, oh, this is Tony's character. We were truly playing these characters and we were developing these characters, and we had been playing for such a length lengthy amount of time that it was honestly amazing. And I don't think I've ever seen that formula in our group repeated. It was the first time I saw 8 people, 9 people at the table sometimes playing in this campaign with us, people popping in, popping out. And we had player characters pitted against each other, and we were all still having fun and laughing and having a good time.
As a GM, what a tightrope to walk
Yeah,
when you're trying to satisfy a lot of people. I've never really enjoyed pitting people actively against each other on any kind of long-term basis, but Dale did a really good job of kind of corralling that. And he admits that, half the time we just made the adventure up as we went. There wasn't really a framework, but I do think that that was probably around, what early to mid 20s when we were actually starting to really think as the character and less as us. Um, and that's probably the lengthiest that we played in. And, some of us went through multiple characters playing that system. That was West End Games, which,
yes.
boy, have I always I just have such a tough time when it comes to games where you're trying to resolve something like combat and there's excessive amounts of dice rolling and math that you have to go through. But at the time, I mean, what's a better system to, what is a better system to use for Star Wars? There really wasn't anything. So, um, yeah, yeah. Do you have a favorite character of all time?
Oh man, yeah. I would honestly have to say the character that sticks with me after all these years is still Ron Corbin. It's he's an infamous character. He wasn't a good dude, and but it's just something that I think it's impactful for me because it was so impactful on our group. I remember, years later, Mike Shandy, the guy that used to be in our group, I've lost contact with him. I show up at his house and he's playing this online MMORPG called Star Wars Galaxies. And he literally created a character named Ron Corbin.
Oh, geez. That
And
must have that must have impressed upon him pretty deeply. I don't remember Mike ever being super regular with us on that
no,
one. Like he'd do a little after school stuff, but hey, it meant something.
it did.
Um,
I liked all my characters. To be honest with you, our games themselves, and I honestly believe the games got better not only because we were getting older. I think it was because we really started to solidify that bond within the core group of us. And we kind of just instinctively knew it might sound silly, but we all subconsciously almost worked together very well. You could kind of always predict what the other people were going to do. It allowed for more seamless gaming to happen, not any conflict. And I think that's what allowed us to really start expanding and play like these opposing sides of player characters fighting each other, but then at times having to come together for a common good. It was very, very interesting, and honestly, out of the gaming groups I've played with, our group has something that I have never ever been able to recreate in any other gaming group.
I think at that point in time too, you start to let go of some of the insecurities. Um, not having to manage every single stat and worry that you're not the best at everything. Sometimes it's really fun playing a flawed character,
Yeah,
um, playing a coward. Where, for me, somebody who grew up watching all these like heroic influences in the the media that I consumed, and then to play the complete opposite, a total like dick coward. That it's a lot of fun when you can get you can push that aside and just let it be and let it happen as it should. So
I
I
think we
actually really started enjoying just about all of my characters. I want to say I was probably mid 20s or so. Because you just don't have to, you don't have to be concerned anymore that you're going to look stupid or anything, and let everybody have things that they're good at. Um, which is, not to say that it's not nice to have good stats, but it sort of became a sub thing for me, and I got way more into actually playing characters.
I remember games where we didn't even pick up dice for the entire game because we literally spent the whole game role playing. That's how impactful our characters started to become. Kermit and I used to joke, I'm not even going to open my dice bag tonight because I bet we don't even have to roll any dice. And we would sit and play for 4 hours and not roll one or very few dice, combat, none, just, like negotiation or, what a perception or, some of those like more socializing roles. And yeah, it was amazing to me that we could sit down on a Sunday afternoon and play from like, what was it, 2 to like 7 or 8 at night and just barely roll anything. We were just there creating this dynamic story with all these characters.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but when we would conclude and be done, I was pretty charged up after that. It felt good to just give your brain a break from, the trappings of the real world and just like relax and be able to do that.
Absolutely. I remember not so much in my older years, in our 30s when we were playing, but definitely in my 20s, there was a time in my life where, it's, I didn't have a girlfriend. I was just kind of working and hanging out and playing games. And I remember strategizing and coming up with ideas and theorizing, and like you said earlier, Dale didn't run that game a lot in Star Wars. A lot of the times it was you and I, you know, shooting the breeze after the game, and we'd be like, "Oh, in the next game we should do this, this, and this." And then before we knew it, we were on this tangent, and we would show up to the next game and just like make everybody backpedal. They'd all be reeling because we would unload this like really ridiculous strategy or something, and then the game became them trying to like get on top of it and stop this like ridiculousness that was unfolding.
Dude, I want to say that was like some Big Brother or Survivor level shit that we were up to.
Yeah,
Uh, Walking down to the store and like, oh my God, what are we gonna do about this? I mean, we got this, and this. Oh man, that's a good idea. Or after the game would end, it would be 2 o'clock in the morning, and we'd walk over to Albertsons and whatever it was, I'd buy chocolate milk and gummy bears or whatever. We're like, man, that was pretty hardcore tonight. We gotta come up with some good strategies. Dale's just gonna have to let us do that.
yeah,
That's a little something different, that's a whole nother level of involvement. But uh that's really cool, like I've gamed with some other groups too, and I felt like a little bit of a potential to go there, but you either had a DM that was really flaky, or they'd prepare like half an hour's worth of content and couldn't roll with the punches and just kind of create extra. Because honestly, I mean, the number one thing that gets rid of your well laid out plans is your table full of PCs. You could have a blinking red light telling them where to go, and then it just they all get together and like, no, no. We've been
you know
there.
the one thing that I will say that was always amazing to me is we never played modules. Looking back, maybe once or I honestly could say I can't honestly remember a time where we sat down and we were like, oh, cool, it's the Crystal Stone Skull adventure, and we're going to go page by page and play this game. It was always us creating these stories. And there are stories that we've played in that I remember better than some movies that I've watched because it was so much fun and so engaging. And like you said, some of us weren't afraid to take on those roles. You enjoyed the cowardly person and the comedic part, and to me that was amazing because it balanced well with Kermit liked to play more of like the subterfuge, like kind of like I don't probably a little bit more meaner Han Solo, a little bit more mean Han Solo. Uh, but then you'd have Sean who always played like the brooding guy, and his like his whole character was designed around his family was murdered. Remember, we used to always tease him about
Yeah,
who
yeah,
got
the
murdered
five
to make
magic
it.
words, you
Yeah,
know,
so
GM,
it
please
was
kill
always
my family. Yeah.
it was
Yep.
always it was just awesome. We just clicked really well together, and yeah,
Ah, yeah.
it was honestly our characters were developed like I would think like they would probably develop like that group within a movie or story that you would read or watch or whatever. you have those dynamic personalities, and we all shined within our specific roles, and we all complemented each other well. It was awesome, and it was fun to see us get into disputes over things, because we genuinely stuck to our guns on our characters. Like, if I was playing a genuinely caring hero or whatever, and Kermit was playing the dastardly guy that maybe was in it for himself, like, I'm not helping those town full of people. What's in it for me? And here I am, like, we need to help them. It's we need to help these innocent people. And yeah, it was just interesting. And I think that's where a lot of that role playing came from, is we would spend an hour just almost internally within the group, trying to get everybody on the same page. Not because we were doing it to be mean to one another or make the game difficult. It was, we were truly following our characters.
Yeah, those are some of the hardest moments, when you're about to get wrecked.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen, but would your character really do this? You say yes, and then like some atrocity happens. But I think that adds flavor to it. I think that we actually have created probably just a massive breadth of well fleshed out characters. I've always kind of been proud of the depth that our characters had. Even if Sean wanted his character's family to be killed every time, he came up with great characters.
Hey, wrestling game. That was one of the most amazing characters ever. I mean, it was ridiculous. Another character that sticks out in my mind was Kermit's character, the superhero that shot kind of like a blast
cannon.
Like a cannon. But he was like, here's this guy, and he's cocky and arrogant. And all of a sudden, Kermit gets the idea of, I'm gonna get sponsored by like energy like I'm gonna be this hero, and I'm gonna have this super suit that looks like a NASCAR uniform because I'm sponsored by like Mountain Dew and Doritos, and and he's like trying to do commercials and stuff as the cannon, and just has catchphrases, and it was hilarious, because here's this superhero game where we're all superheroes, and suddenly this like spin-off begins to happen, and it just becomes like this unstoppable thing that was just awesome. And I remember that to this day.
Yeah, I mean, that's some boys level stuff before the boys were even the boys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're right, that's things we watch on TV now, and this is stuff that we were doing in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, shades of it anyways. I can honestly say I never played a Superman that would pleasure himself on top of a high rise with the city below me, unless I allowed myself to be taken over by a psionicist. Even though out of game I knew better than to do it, my character did not. So I don't remember what happened there. It was just some like awful things, and I just gritted my teeth, and Dale had to figure out a way to get me out of it. So
that was awesome. Yeah, see, those are the games to me that were just amazing. Yeah, for a person in our group to think of, I'm gonna meet as the bad guy, I'm gonna meet with the main hero, and I'm gonna try to trick him into thinking that I'm gonna become a good guy. And because you are so disciplined in that role, that you're like, yes, we must give him a chance, and you go in there, and 10 minutes later he comes walking out in your body because you took control of it, and the next scene is him at with like 5 hookers, and you're doing cocaine or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, we're at the end of the first segment. We're gonna be right back after this break. All right, everybody, we're back. And if you're just joining us, Tony was having a really good laugh about a role-playing game character that I played, who was extremely good and naive, and ran afoul of one of my fellow player characters who was not so good and not naive at all, who took control of my character, who was essentially a Superman-like character. And I believe that hookers and dope were involved or something. But thank goodness I don't know if the internet existed in this Heroes game that we were playing, so it just didn't really get out there. It was probably a very localized event. Um,
It was in the Star magazines, and you remember the old tabloid magazines?
oh yeah, yeah, like Hero Watcher. That's what it would be in, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
but we were discussing just the depths of our characters and getting to that point as a gamer where it stops being you the character and it starts being the character. You start playing the character as the character and stop infusing too much of yourself into it, which is kind of a good little piece of escapism there.
yeah.
um so kind of skipping around a little bit, how do you feel about everybody being involved in it now, all the people who are picking it up for the first time?
I'm excited. To me, it's we've touched on this in other episodes. Is the more people that are involved, the more opportunity for new product, for new perceptions of maybe how games should be run, new rules. It's interesting to see, for example, D&D go from this like complicated THAC0 calculating the armor classes to now where you've got fairly straightforward fifth edition. It's easy and accessible. You've got third-party companies that are building supplement books for fifth edition. That it's really an interesting time. It is frustrating though, like anything, companies see this as an opportunity to make money, and I get it, business is business, but it's difficult. I'm probably today in this day and age between, we talk about toy collecting, we talk about miniatures, we talk about gaming. To me, that's the most frustrating part is the capitalist approach to this. Is it's an opportunity for companies to make money, and often the direction they take to make money is make a new edition. I remember growing up as a kid, we would play an edition for a decade.
Yeah,
There wouldn't be a new edition. There would just be supplements that would come out, and that was
yeah,
it.
yeah, like Palladium, you'd get the core book, and it'd be what, half a year or a year before we saw the supplements that came in for it. We had Heroes Unlimited, and Ninjas and Super Spies kind of worked in tandem with that. But what was it? Was it Villains? No, it wasn't Villains Unlimited, was it? That was the second one that came out. Anyways, there were those supplements were like a year, and dude, we would get word at Dan's shop that they were coming out and be really jazzed. And there was always a publishing delay or some kind of a problem with it. But um,
But
yeah, those systems
it
had a
was
lot of longevity back then. It really seems like Dungeons and Dragons is leading the way for, coming out with the updated rule system every couple of years now. And really, you got to have you can do it with the main book. You do need the monsters manual. Uh, at some point, you're gonna have to stop making stats up for all the creatures, but the player's handbook. So like you got those 3 core books, and to have to buy those every couple of years is kind of a bummer.
yeah. Yeah, and it's and again, I understand business is business. People want to make money, so it's not to be a negative. It's just in these days, I don't get as excited for a new edition. Like I remember us being excited for, like you said, we'd show up at Infinite Frontiers and the new edition of this is coming out, and we're like, oh my god, like this is crazy, like excited. And when it came out, we were totally on board to a point in our group in later years where we're like, oh god, they're doing another edition of D&D,
Yeah.
and it's D&D point half, 3.5 now instead of 3, and it was just like, we don't need it.
Yeah, I think at that point, once we jumped onto Pathfinder, I considered that to be a fairly optimal
Yeah,
system for gaming, very outside user friendly, accessible coming in, very clear cut rules in the way that the stats and everything work. That's a system where, 20 years from now, God willing, I actually have someone that wants to game with me. We could sit down around a table and play, and the gameplay would run pretty crisp. Combat would be resolved quickly,
yeah,
and it would let you focus down more on the story. So
yeah.
I haven't seen the latest D&D edition, but I almost wish they'd just slow it down a little bit, take their time with the supplements. But
It's just interesting.
probably not likely.
it's interesting to see companies like the major brand Star Wars. Star Wars has had what 5 or 6 different companies print role playing books for them through the years, multiple editions. You've got games like Shadowrun that are on like 6th edition, and yet here you got Pathfinder, I think, that just got to 2nd edition, and that game's been
Yeah.
out since like
Yeah, that book came out in like 2009 or whatever it was, like way back then.
it's just to me it just
And
shows.
now their outer space game is coming. I think it's called Starfinder or
Yeah,
something.
that's actually been out for a little while, but yeah, to me that's the difference. Is here's this non property, I guess. Pathfinder is an open source book. So, it's an open source system. You can, use it and make supplements with it. And there's a lot of support for Pathfinder out there. But then you got D&D's on episode, or that's on version 5 going on 6. And, Star Wars has got another new, company writing books for them now. And it's just, it's interesting to see that difference.
Yeah, is Star Wars still using all those strange dice?
I believe Fantasy Flight still owns all the rights to Star Wars still.
Okay,
So
so the latest edition, that was a huge turnoff for me. I hated the different, like having to buy that special like $15 set of Star Wars dice to play, which I did because I wanted to play. I'm sure that you did too.
I bought them all.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, at one point I was thinking of buying 2 sets, but thank goodness we don't play that one anymore. Yeah, I do think though, having seen what Star Wars did, and we've had multiple licensed games, Transformers and GI Joe, that have come through, and they're just not good systems. It makes me wonder how that gets to the publishing process, like through all of the play testing. Um, they just seem really, really bogged down to me. And if you are a newcomer who doesn't know any of the rules, and you're unfamiliar with how this all works, I mean, don't you think that's pretty important, having something that's just open and easy to get to?
I totally agree. And it's concerning because when that product is released, maybe that was the product that sparked the interest in a potential newcomer into gaming. And to me, if that's their first introduction and it's terrible, the chances of them continuing with that hobby are slim and none, and they're just going to move on. And we've talked about miniature gaming, and it's challenging finding opponents to play with. It's challenging to find people that play those games because it's expensive. It is, and it's kind of a niche thing. Not a lot of people like to paint and assemble models, but you get that bad taste in your mouth from that first experience. And I've taught people Warhammer 40K that have become far more involved and engaged in Warhammer than I ever would be, and then I've taught people how to play that were like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So
Did you ever get Eric to bite on any of that stuff?
yeah, Eric was actually a huge Warhammer fan. He actually ended up with multiple armies. He had Necrons and Orcs. Jeff Ray actually got into it too and had multiple armies. His son was into it. And then we had a guy in the group that was into it, just didn't have a lot of money, but he would find ways, eBay deals, and just try to get those good deals that he could find to make it work. But then unfortunately you'd have a guy that would join the group and you'd get him into the game and he'd be like, I gotta buy a $40 book to play my army and the rule book and this and that, and now I gotta buy paint and build my models. Like, good God, man. And it became kind of a thing of like, oh, you can do it, trying to like, encourage them to continue with the hobby. But if you don't have that, you're gonna stop playing. It's just unfortunate the way it is. I'll be honest, if anybody hasn't know, I'm officially a toy collector now, or action figure collector, excuse me. My good friend Steve sent me over my first action figure, and so I started looking, and I remember texting you guys a few days ago, and I was just like, I don't know where to start next. Like, I don't know if these prices. Am I looking at the right prices? Am I going to get taken advantage of? Like, it's just it's hard. You look at the toys, and you know, and I know most people are probably trying to do the best they can, but you look at some and it's, you don't read the fine print. And I'm like, why are all these cool Transformers coming from China? Is that okay to buy these these Transformers from China? Like, does that, is that okay? Like,
Mm. As long as they take the money and they ship the product, then play ball.
yeah, I mean, it's just trying to navigate myself through that new hobby to begin with, and then if you have that bad experience, I guess is what I'm getting at. Ultimately, it's just a double whammy, and a lot of people are like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go play video games."
Well, yeah, yeah, and I suppose like when you look at the long-term investment on a video game, you got the main game, which is 60 or 70 bucks, and then usually at launch, if it's really big, there's 40 or 50 bucks worth of expansion and DLC and all that you can do. But after that, it becomes very, very sporadic, it seems, that content is released and you're in at 10 or 15 bucks here or there. Uh, right now, to get into a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, I'm fairly certain that you're in at like what, 50 bucks a book for the 3 core books that you need to play the game.
You know, I'm gonna be honest with you. It's, I don't know if it's because a new edition is on the horizon for D&D, but you can go to Amazon right now and buy them for like 25 to 35 bucks.
Oh, good, good.
It's actually pretty amazing. You can find deals on them and get them really cheap. I think during the Black Friday sales, I think Amazon had them for $19.99. Like, we're talking hardback, full color, nice books. It was, if you can hang on and wait for those deals, and that is the thing that's different about, like, not so much anymore. So I wouldn't be truly speaking correctly, is that is one thing that I have seen, is these old books that we have become something of value. I have multiple books in my collection now that are going for $500, $600, $700 on eBay for
Wow.
books, like books that we bought for 15 bucks. And I don't know if it's just that, like we've talked about, the our hobbies have grown. They've become more main stage and popular and accepted. So, is it people that are like, man, I used to do that in secret in my buddy's basement, and now I want to get all those memories back, so I'm willing to buy these books that are, faded and torn and jacked up for $200-300 just because I want that piece of nostalgia back.
Yeah, what really surprised me is the market for Nintendo games and
Yeah,
video
that's
games. Seeing, I mean, all it is like the cartridge, the box, and the instruction manual. But some of those old Nintendo games are hundreds of dollars now. And I mean, they get them graded just like collectibles, like a Pokemon card or a baseball card now.
like
Um,
Magic or anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a certain collector's element. In a million years, I would have never associated like a West End Star Wars game book and big money,
Yeah.
down the future. But
And it's
you're very right. A lot of these out of print books that you can't get anymore, um, particularly weird stuff like the Book of Vile Darkness. So some of these other like obscure books that maybe had one print run and it was, 50,000 copies or whatever, and they've since then gotten mold or mildew or various other fluids on them, and they're not in any kind of shape to be handled. But um
it's honestly not the main, like, the player's handbooks or the dungeon master guides. It's not those books. You're absolutely right. It's those oddities, like you said, the low run books that didn't see a lot of copies. There's Shadowrun books that didn't see a lot of copies, and there are quite a few that,
yeah,
I
and
think.
at the time we probably took a look at some of these and we're like, man, this is booty. I'm never playing this module. Or, well, this is stupid. This only has 2 new character classes in it. I'm not going to play with that dumb thing. And yeah, here they are, uh, out there getting big money. So I'm really happy to see people coming into it as well. When I think about what role playing meant to me as a kid, that sort of like suspending some of the crap. You might have a crappy life or an okay life, but being able to just forget about that for a little bit and engage in this improv world where you can create, um, that's really neat. And I say the more the merrier, the more accepting it is, the merrier. Um, I'm
Yeah.
also thinking that there might be certain media that is driving people towards games too. I mean,
I
I
think
don't know if it was the Lord of the Rings or Witcher or something like that, where people see this and they realize that it's some sort of medieval like fantasy style thing and they want to be involved with it. But I mean, we had to reach real deep when we were kids. I mean, that was um, Dragon Slayer or Excalibur or something, or Conan the Barbarian. And then you went through this like late 80s through the 2000s drought of any great fantasy. So maybe that's kind of driving people towards it too.
well, back in our day, as silly as it sounds, you had the D&D as devil worshippers, and those types of things, because it wasn't mainstream. And now almost everything that's mainstream is almost always some type of sci-fi. It's not a lot of real, just like generic, like a war movie or so. It's almost everything kind of has this tinge of science fiction to it, or fantasy, or it's just become, I think, the product that people want. And I think what it does is it just, oh, I really like that Marvel movie. Oh, there's a miniatures game. How does that, like a board game? How does that work? Oh, cool. Now I'm sitting around the table with six of my friends and we're drinking beer or whatever and playing a board game together, and everybody's laughing and having a good time. To me, opportunities for role playing created opportunities for me to create friends. I remember there was, in my early 20s, between the group we had, between the other groups I gamed with, I probably had 30 or 40 friends in the Tri-Cities that we gamed with on a regular basis. That's incredible. Nowadays I know kids that don't have any friends. They all their friends are online and from different states, and that's it.
Yeah.
And
And I think that when you have to sit at a table with somebody in person, there is a certain level of like decorum and respect that you have for people. So it stops you from being like that completely, you know, super asshole online that talks a bunch of smack or that's completely rude. So I want to say that maybe that's part of it too. When you game with a group of people, maybe it's a little bit stronger being there in person because
yeah, it's a
you don't have that anonymity anymore. Um, do you think a lot of people have a hard time playing, like getting into character and doing voices?
well, we talked about that a little bit and touched on it. Is I have played with other groups, and you have people that, I've played with a spectrum of people, from people that are just like, okay, here's our module, we're gonna go page by page, and it's just about fighting. What loot did we get? The numbers, maxing out the best numbers to do the most damage, all the way to people that have been like, I don't care if my stats 9. This is the character that I want to play, and this is his story, and it's going to be fun, and I don't care.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit to put yourself out there to
Yeah.
do a voice, but I think when somebody does that, it sort of like opens the gateway for other people to start engaging and doing that. And if you've got a good DM, well, they'll say like like the bartender is talking to the character, like, well, I'm not sure what you're looking for, but there might be some other adventurers around here. And then the player's like, I tell him thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I played with people like that. I think I think you're
I
right.
tell the bartender thank you. And I just picture like this guy standing straight up stiff. I tell the bartender thank you, looking at the bartender.
I intimidate. I got an 18. Well, what are you intimidating him with? Oh, I'm intimidating him. Well, what do you do?
Yeah, like literally walking up to to the NPC and being like 18.
You're intimidated.
Not even enough to be like 18.
Yeah, just
18.
got an 18 plus my 4 for charisma is a 22. Like, okay.
22. Not even they don't even do that. And then the bad guy's like, "What?"
But it's you're definitely right. I believe that when there's that comfortable, safe place that people are comfortable with one another, it does. And it's funny because I've played with, I've gone out of town and we have a couple friends that have moved away to Portland and some other areas. And I've hooked up with them and done some one shot games just for old time's sake. And all of a sudden you have these people knocking on the door and they're like, it's the, chief financial officer for some like local company in Portland that you would never imagine playing D&D. And his wife is like on the school board or something. And then they're like geeking out and playing this game with you. And it's funny to see people transform into that, that genuine having a good time.
Yeah, it's really good seeing the celebrities that are into it.
Yeah.
I think that's a super positive thing. I don't know that I would want a game with Henry Cavill. I think he's probably pretty effing hardcore. But maybe that what's his name, Joe Manganiello.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty good guy.
He has an effing dungeon built in his house. I mean, like, where wouldn't you want a game? The guy's got a big ass long, like old stained oak table, dragon head up on the wall. That would be really cool.
Talk to me
Uh,
about not being comfortable in that setting. They're sitting around the table with like Vince Vaughn and all these guys from all these famous movies or bands. And
and
what do? 18.
yeah, yeah. Vin Diesel is playing because he's experienced and played a long time. He's playing like a gnome bard or
Yeah.
something like that.
I'm gonna sing a song for them.
What must that be like?
It would be very
Breaks out into song. He sounds like those rap guys that used to collaborate with the pop stars in late 90s and the early 2000s.
like the new metal bands.
Oh, you bad guys, like Tom Waits. Hey, bad guys, jin, 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 here come the heroes. But that'd be fun. That would be fun.
It would be. It would be pretty surreal. Uh, so you've asked me a lot of questions, and I feel bad because I haven't asked you a lot of questions.
Oh, that's okay. You can ask away, man.
We've talked about how we got into the games. Uh, we've talked about some of our favorite characters. What was your favorite campaign that you've played in? You asked me, and I wanted to know yours.
Well, that's really tough for me because I look back at a lot of my 25 and under stuff, and in my opinion, looking at that, a lot of it seemed really flawed. Like some of my like outside personal emotions might have gotten involved. Um, I do think that, when we were gaming a little bit less frequently, we would get together like on a Saturday or something or a Sunday, and it wasn't these summertime deals where we were gaming 5-6 hours a day for 3 or 4 days. I enjoyed almost all of the characters that I came up with. Like I would say that post Star Wars area or era, although I really did like Plex Kraken a lot. That was a very fun character for me to play. I'd never played like a bad guy before in a game. Um, so I really enjoyed that Star Wars character, but I can't look back at any of the characters I've created in the last 20 some odd years and not say that I didn't get a lot of enjoyment out of like all of them.
Yeah.
Some of the games ended too soon, and it was a little frustrating for me when Dale would say, okay, well, we're going to play a Dungeons and Dragons game, so think about what kind of character you want to play. Man, I would be at work driving the big truck, or maybe in between some stuff at work, and I'd be starting to think of like, yeah, so this character, he was maybe I've played warrior dwarfs before, but maybe I'll play this dwarf that doesn't have a beard and he's got a flat top and he doesn't talk like a regular dwarf, and I would start into this thing and I'd be like, maybe he sounds like kind of like a little asshole like this. And I would kind of spend quite a bit of time coming up with how this character felt and how they played. And then we
Yeah.
play like 2 games. So
Yeah.
like we had a Star Wars campaign where I got to play a Jedi that was pretty fun. I got to play the conflicted hero with Dyson Storm, um, not knowing whether he should embrace doing the right thing and go the Jedi route or go with, these feelings of revenge and hatred. So that was kind of fun playing a conflicted character like that. Sometimes the good naive characters that got taken advantage of were really fun to play. I really liked playing as Lambert, uh, the guy who's actually kind of badass, but he's too much of a selfish dick and a coward. So that was kind of a fun one to play. Um, so I really enjoyed just about everything like post mid-20s. Because that's that I just had the time to create the characters, and sometimes it would even start with a voice. We played like some Firefly style campaigns that I thought were pretty fun. I really enjoyed that. Um, and for me, when I would think of a character, sometimes I would think of an actor or a character from a show, and I really liked certain characteristics that I would pull in, or voices, and then kind of build the character around it. So, I mean, almost everything we played, I really enjoyed my characters. Oh, I'll tell you what, we played a Shadowrun game, and gosh, I don't remember what, because I didn't really like Shadowrun. The system bugged me. What was this? What was that one that we were playing? I don't remember my character's name, but there was a thing where he comes upon these like thugs in an alleyway that are sort of they're victimizing somebody, and he's got snacks in his hands, and he took his gun, and like he's got, like, you don't want to drop your snacks, right? And got stuff in the mouth, but like cocked the gun under my chin. That was a really good moment, but like watched the violence ensue and didn't get involved, even though real Steve would have a real hard time with that. This guy was kind of a scuzzball. So I don't remember what that campaign was. I don't remember the character's name, but I keep all my character sheets. So they're still in that blue bag that I've had since high school that would come over when we gamed. That thing is kind of dirty and stinky.
Yeah, I would think so after like 40 years.
Yeah, yeah, it's something else. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't more directly answer your question. I think I probably had some of the most fun when I was playing as Plex Kraken and you were Braun Corbin, only because of the level of like
Absurdity.
insanity and post gaming shit that we would do, and the things that we had to make Dale listen to that we wanted to do. I mean,
Yeah.
he had to just be sitting back going, "What the F? What the F is going on?" We never did any fashion shows or anything, but
Well, Dale's a very true like Star Wars fan, so for him, we were utter blasphemous when we were doing some stuff we were doing.
yeah, that was a pretty good time. I really enjoyed that. Um, so yeah. What else you got for me?
Oh, yeah. I don't really can't think of any other questions I would ask. Yeah, I guess I just asked all my questions in that one question.
It's okay. I mean, we've been talking like 40 some odd minutes just about gaming. So hopefully somebody out there is going to get some enjoyment from it. I really like that we're kind of able to open up our space a little bit. I know that Doug's really interested in hearing this. He's missing not being here. He's messaged me that he can't wait to see what we come up with. So um
I do have a
yeah,
question. COVID.
sure.
How much has COVID impacted your gaming? Do you still game? Do you still have, have you met anybody at where you moved to that you've
Uh,
been about?
I don't coming over here has been a way more of a blessing than a curse. I absolutely love it where I live. I'm like 80 miles north of Seattle, so I'm not stuck in all that like traffic and the hubbub and the commutes. I really love where I'm at. Um, it has given me a really good chance to like double down on being a good dad and a good husband because there's no outside noise, right? I'm focused on my wife and my stepson. That being said, though, I can't tell you how often I'm driving around in my truck and I just come up with like a good character name or a good concept, and I start trying to talk like the character. So I still do this stuff. Um, I would love to find a group, but it might almost be a little disappointing if it wasn't anything like my old group. We got Bellingham right up the road, so there's just nothing but gamers and nerds up in Bellingham.
It's
I
hard
still
to,
have a strong desire to do it. I do not want to do it like this,
no,
over Zoom. It's not
unfortunately,
nearly as fun that way.
that's kind of
Um,
the thing.
so I don't know, maybe at some point if the stars align, I'll be back that way and we can all get together and game. But at this point, I would just take us all getting back together for a barbecue or something. I do miss you guys, but I love it up here more than I'm missing home in that aspect.
It's okay. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, it was the friendships that were forged from gaming that are meaningful to me. And the books, I hang on to them and keep them, not because I'm still playing like I used to play when I was younger, but just like I said, just looking at them on the shelf, remembering all those things that we've done together and the laughing, even the bad times, the good times. Like you said, it's just, yeah, it's stuck with me. It's nothing that
And
I've ever been, disappointed at or anything like that.
once we sort of grew up too,
Yeah.
I think that really helped our group dynamic. We grew up a little bit. So man, I think that's a good place to call it. I don't know how you feel about it, but um, we hope that anybody who's viewing this really enjoyed it or it sparked some memories. You can leave some comments below on the video. You can find me over on Facebook as the Plastic Adventures Toy Community. Doug is the Toyman 80s with a bunch of underscores in there. It's a lot to keep track of. Or you can get a hold of Tony now at Don't Contact Me. So until next time, everybody, we'll see you in the toy aisle.
Take care, everybody.